Lakshmi is a television host producer, a New York Times best-selling author, a UNDP Goodwill Ambassador, and an ACLU Artist Ambassador. She is the creator of the critically acclaimed Hulu series, Taste the Nation, which has been nominated for a 2021 Gotham Award in a breakthrough series. And it has also been given the green light for season 2. Padma also serves as host and executive producer of Bravo's 2-time Emmy-winning series, Top Chef, which has been nominated for 32 Emmys, including a 2-time nomination for Outstanding Host for a reality competition program. Its new season will be premiering in spring of 2021. So please join me in welcoming Padma Lakshmi.
Hi.
Hi, Padma. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Hi, everybody at Google. I'm told you called.
Okay. So we are here today to celebrate the launch of the paperback version of Tangy Tart, Hot and Sweet. I actually want to go back to the launch of that hardcover copy and ask you simply, why did you initially decide to create the recipes in this book?
Initially, and yes, it came out in 2007. There were a lot of cookbooks out there that were either celebrity driven or, chef driven, or they were single cuisine. And my cooking never fit into those buckets. I just wanted to make yummy food. I had traveled a lot. The people in my circle were from different parts of the world. I had a very international cross-section of friends and family who had also experienced different flavors and wanted to eat Mexican one day and Chinese the next and Moroccan the third. And of course, I'm Indian, so there's a lot of Indian food in there as well. So I wanted to do a book that I felt was reflective of the way we ate today in most urban cities around the world. And just, it's not fusion food. It is, I guess, but it has an authenticity to it that's true to the original recipe of wherever that dish came from. But at the same time, we're all busy. We're all working full time. We all have families. And so I wanted to make those recipes that seemed a little out there, or recipes that we loved to eat when we would get takeout or go out, but didn't necessarily make at home, whether it was a Thai curry or South Indian curry. And that's really how the book came about. The name of the book, Tangy Tart, Hot and Sweet, refers to all the 4 flavors that I think should be in every bite of savory food and even sweet food. So, I like the flavors of Indian street food, which are very sour and sweet and spicy and hot, So that's really where the title comes from.
Okay. Well, one thing I can say about you is that you do not lack flavor in any of your work. And you almost make spicy seem like it's essential to all cooking. So as chefs, we understand balancing flavors, but how could we help those who don't understand spiciness, that it doesn't have to set your tongue on fire?
Yeah, as I've grown older, I used to like that kind of set my tongue on fire feeling, but I don't like it as much anymore. I enjoy it, but I can't take it, frankly. And so I love spicy food, but to me, not everything needs to be super spicy, but everything has to be well seasoned. To me, the real skill of a good cook, whether they're professional or not, is how much they know about spices. Because if you take the spices out of a dish, it's just basic pantry ingredients, usually a protein like chicken, lamb, beef, pork, or fish. And then it's some staple vegetables. It's always going to be onions, garlic, maybe ginger, bell pepper, tomatoes, right? And really what you're giving, really where you're getting the personality of a dish or a nationality or ethnicity of a dish is in the spices. So you understand how to use spices. You understand how to make food delicious without a lot of calories, without a lot of cost, without a lot of fat or preservatives. So to me, understanding how to use a spice collection is integral to cooking. And that is what turns something from chicken parmesan to chicken vindaloo to chicken fajitas to green chicken curry. It's those spices that you're using. And to me, understanding how to use those spices takes a little bit of effort, but isn't hard. You should just make a dish that you already love and know how to make well. And here's one spice, like cumin, the ubiquitous spice in Middle Eastern, Asian, and Mexican food, among others, and just add it to something that you normally make, so you can tell what it's doing to the dish, so you can tell what flavor it's giving, and then you build on that. I am not a proponent of throwing every spice into every dish, because then A, everything tastes the same, but B, you don't taste the nuance of the different flavors of the things that are in there. And I want to taste the meat. I want to taste the vegetable or whatever grain or potatoes I'm eating.
I hear you on that one for sure. So this book takes us on adventures of food and people. It's personal, it's exciting, it's entertaining, and filled with international cuisine and really unforgettable flavors and people. So how do you top that? Like, what was your approach to writing this book?
Well, for a lot of it, it was just gathering recipes. It had been a long time since I wrote my first book, which came out in 1999. And I didn't want to write another book until I had something valid to say, something concrete to contribute. I mean, there's so many books published every year, not just cookbooks, but especially cookbooks. And I really didn't want it to get lost in the shuffle. On the other hand, I had a very specific point of view and things that I like to eat, which are highly flavored, which are not bland, and I thought so many recipes sounded the same to me that I wanted to take my time, and I did take my time. It took me, about 4 years to gather all of the recipes for this dish. And a lot of it was honestly just experimenting in the kitchen, or a lot of it was coming home from a trip to Morocco with, beautiful things that I had gathered in the souk there in Marrakesh, like preserved lemon, like harissa paste, things that I had known about. But it's different when you go to the native country where it comes from and you see how people use it in their cuisine. And I think that's really important too, to understand what it does, to understand why it's important in these dishes that it gets used in. So in my case, those recipes are really a function of my travel or of being exposed to them in someone else's house who is from that culture.
Okay. Which brings me to like the big, bright, bold flavors that can seem so intimidating. And your creations always burst with flavor, and you really do guide us through that process. So as I read the recipes and I make my list of ingredients that I buy, I almost felt like you were with me, like every step of the way. Was that a process in creating this book?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up between two cultures. I grew up mostly in the States. I came here when I was 4, but I also went back home every summer for 3 months to South India. So I was always explaining Indian food to Americans, whether it was kids who came home to my house to have dinner at my place with my mom cooking pretty much very Indian food, or I was explaining things like peanut butter, to my Indian cousins and friends when I went back to India, that I would bring back these snacks from America. So I think a lifetime of not being totally at home in one culture, but having a foot in each one, made me an interpreter for my peers in both countries. And so it was just, I had the practice of doing it. And also I think the essence of good cookbook writer to explain how to make something when you're not standing there in the room. That is really essential to being a good recipe writer. You want to convey how to make this recipe, how it should taste. No two stoves are alike. You get 2 chilies, one is really hot, one is medium hot. So you have to give the reader or the maker of your recipe license to use their senses. I'm not a trained chef. I've never worked the line in a restaurant. I have worked in restaurants, but I haven't worked in the kitchen. So for me, this is a book for home cooks. This is a book to guide you, lead you by the hand, and say anybody can cook. You just have to give yourself time and patience and be kind to yourself. Don't try a new recipe when you're having 8 friends over to dinner. That's going to create a high stress situation that is not conducive to cooking, nicely, to cooking good food. But do take a Saturday and make it a leisurely event. If most big cities like Seattle or New York have great ethnic markets. Here, if you live in New York City, I would recommend Kalustian's. They're great. They're on Lexington and 28th Street. They have every spice you could ever want. But there are also a lot of online mail order sources now that you can get almost anything you want online. So I say, look at the recipe, read the recipe a couple of times, all the way through, prepare all of your ingredients. That's what the big chefs do at the restaurants, right? They have a mise en place, and that's everything in its place, so that you're not stressed out when you're cooking. It's all ready to go. The worst thing to do is like make a new recipe. You're sauteing something and you realize, oh my God, I need ginger. I haven't even chopped the ginger, which is going to take some time. And if you're smart, you'll immediately turn off the stove. But, if you're smarter, you'll do it before. And that just takes the stress off of your shoulders. And it makes it an activity. It makes it a creative experience. It makes it relaxing and fun. And that's what cooking should be. It should be a creative, relaxing activity. And obviously with COVID and everybody working from home this year, we're all cooking more. I think people are much more interested in home cooking than they maybe were this time last year. So it's nice to discover new ways to, just make a simple roast chicken or, ground meat in a different way by changing up 2 or 3 of the spices and herbs.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree with that, and that's really what we try to, instill in our Googlers as we teach them how to cook and what to cook, and what I found so incredibly wonderful about your book was just the sheer fact that it was for a home cook, maybe an inexperienced cook, but it was also for like the person who loves to cook. And I think that there are challenges and flavors and all this excitement that can come from one of your recipes. And was, that in the back of your mind too, when you were writing this book, to make it for everyone?
I wanted to give a nice mix. I wanted some of the recipes to have very few ingredients, to be able to be whipped up in 30 minutes. My mother is famous for that. In our family, you can show up to her house at 2 a.m. and she'll have 2 zucchini rolling around in the crisper and a sad box of opened couscous, but she would make you this beautiful dish. And so I wanted some of the recipes to be very approachable, very easy, very doable on a weeknight when you're coming home at 7. Maybe you have kids to help with homework as well, But then I also wanted a few more complex recipes that were sort of showstoppers. And I would say the most fiddly recipes, probably the couple that have phyllo pastry in them. And, even in those recipes, I say, please buy your phyllo pastry. Like, don't even sweat it. I've never made phyllo pastry by scratch, for example, and I'd love to try, but, there's really good phyllo pastry that you can find in the refrigerated or freezer section of any good market. And it's really fun to make. And there's a Moroccan bistia, which is a Moroccan pigeon pie. And in my version, you make it with chicken. You can make it with turkey or any minced meat you want. It's hard to ask people to make pigeon. I don't even know where I'd be able to find it. But it's delicious. It's so delicious. And it's really an activity. And it's something you should attempt when you have the time to enjoy the activity and not be stressed about the outcome. And I guarantee you, even if it doesn't come out nicely the first time, the second time you make it, you will know exactly where things went awry or why you didn't maybe wet the towel enough that you're putting to keep the phyllo pastry down. Stuff like that you can really only learn from doing the recipe and practicing. More than a book, more than being a book for people, it's a book for people who like to eat. If you love to eat, if you love going to different restaurants and trying different hot sauces or different spices, if you like that kind of savory, flavor-filled food, then you'll enjoy this book.
I definitely agree with you on that. And I do find that sometimes people are just afraid of flavor. Like they think they don't like something and then they don't try it. And there's parts of your book where you kind of like demystify what it's going to be like. For people who obviously have not read the book yet, but will, can you just like touch briefly on how people should like not be afraid to experience flavor?
I think you have to go slow. If somebody really doesn't like spicy food or their tummy hurts, it's not going to help if you just throw them in at the deep end. But like I said, if you take cumin or something like sumac, which is a Middle Eastern spice, it's a beautiful dark red vermilion color. It comes from a berry. The berry actually grows wild in America. Native Americans used to use it, in cough syrup, and they still use it as a seasoning. It gives you a tart, bright, sour taste to dishes without adding moisture. Usually when we want to add acid or sourness to something, what do? We add lime juice, lemon juice, tamarind, vinegar, all the things that come in a liquid base, right? Or pulp. So sumac is great not only for garnishing because it's beautiful. When you have food that's all brown but delicious, you can toss a little sumac on there. It's pretty. But it does give this beautiful, bright, fruity tartness without giving you any moisture. So for example, there's a very simple recipe, which is just pita chips. Just like you buy Stacy's pita chips, if you have old pita laying around that you haven't used up, cut them into triangles and then toss them with some olive oil and sumac, which will last. It's just a spice. It'll last in your pantry for ages. And you just toss that with salt and sumac and you bake it. And that way, that pita chip is a real neutral canvas for you to try and experiment with this spice. And that will tell you, what does it do? How does it taste? How much should I put? Follow the directions. But see, you may want more sumac. You may want less. You want to empower the reader and really give them license to develop their own palate and decide what they like and hone their cooking skill to their own personal taste. Because to me, yes, cooking can be very intellectual, but it should be a joy. It should be a sensorial, sensual pleasure. I can tell if something is done by looking at it or by smell. I know when the smell changes that something is done. Or I can listen for the sizzle, or I can listen for how fast, the mustard seeds are popping or the water is boiling. So cooking should really, and also by touching things, right? Cooking should really be an activity that employs all of your senses. And that's when it becomes fun. And that's when you start learning to cook, because your senses are telling you when things are done or when they need a little more cooking. I can't hear you. There you go.
Sorry. My dog was barking. So I was just going to say that's pretty much like what we do too. We tell them, taste your food, play with your food, like just get in there and not be afraid. So I just love that about this book as well. So your love for food and people and culture is so evident in, Taste the Nation. And I have to tell you, I've binge watched it twice already. And what dish or person or culture really just sticks with you and just became part of you?
Gosh, Marian, I think all of them. I mean, I wanted to do this show for a long time. I did a radio interview with a friend of mine who said, Tangy Tart, Hot and Sweet seems like the companion book to Taste the Nation, even though I wrote it 14 years ago. And it's true. I'd never thought about it that way, but in looking at it through her eyes, I saw that is very possible. I've been banging the same drum for a long time. I genuinely love to discover other cultures and other people living within my community, whether it's across the street or across the country, and discovering their foods, because you learn so much more from meeting people and experiencing their food that is so important to them, not only because those flavors remind them of home, but it's also how they're passing their culture on to their families. And so that dish takes on so much deeper meaning. It has such a nice resonance for that family. And their passion is so palpable that it's wonderful to learn about food from the actual people who make it day in and day out, not the scholars, although that is very important. And I certainly enjoy that. And I did my research for, heavy research for a lot of these episodes. But, at the end of the day, it's about a mother feeding her child. It's about a father going to eat with his favorite, going to eat his favorite meal with his son. It's about friends sharing food. And so that kind of simple pleasure of food is really what I think bonds people as well. And so it's a good icebreaker. This country is a wonderful country. It's given so many people a second chance, my family included. But it's also a very divided country right now, more so than we ever realized. I don't think that division came 5 years ago. I think it was simmering, and it was exposed to a degree that it hadn't been before. But it's important to reach out and try to understand each other, even or maybe especially when we don't agree, I would say. And so food for me was a great Trojan horse. It was a great vehicle to get to know people. And, Taste the Nation was not made for people who think like me. It was not made for people who believe in diversity, who really believe in a pluralistic society. It was made with the hopes of opening a conversation with people who don't think like me, who are maybe much more nationalist or isolationist. And there's millions of those people, as we saw in this country. And I wanted to find a neutral ground to talk about very difficult issues. And because food is the language that people are used to hearing me speak in anyway, it made sense for me. Taste the Nation is really a political show disguised as a cultural food show. It sort of gives you, I hope it gives you both. I hope it gives you also history, that we know somewhere in the back of our heads, but haven't actively thought about as it relates to the context of our times today.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what happens when I watch it. I mean, and you just really start to connect with the people and their culture. I was going to ask you a question, but now that I know that, you're going to have season 2, is there, what can we expect from that, if you're allowed to even say?
Well, we're actually, we're in pre-production right now. We're trying to figure out how to shoot the show safely, but not diminish the quality that we've established in season 1. Obviously, I want to keep my crew safe, but I also am very mindful that I'm going into people's homes every day, that I'm traveling every week. When I do the show, I go into a new community in a new city, and I embed myself there all week. And I'm really I'm in people's bedrooms, I'm in their living rooms, I'm in the back of their restaurants, I'm in their backyard. We are trying to be as intimate as we can so that we really understand the community from within, and we lead the episode with people in the community talking for themselves. So a show that's predicated on intimacy is hard to do in COVID, but we're going to go back into production, later on in the spring, early summer. This year, we'll probably only be able to get 2 or 3 episodes out before the calendar year. We'd like them to air, in fourth quarter during holiday, but the rest of the season will probably only air in 2022. I want, I don't want the trail to go cold, obviously. I have such pride in the show, and I really am looking forward to going to different communities, I think there's still a lot to discuss. There's still a lot to uncover. I want to look at how different communities have cross-pollinated in seasons to come. But there's so many episodes and so many different ethnicities and communities that I didn't have a chance to go to. We had a long list, which we wrote down, collectively. So there were a lot of places that I wanted to go in season 1 that I didn't have a chance to go to. So I'm looking forward to doing that in the next 12 months.
Wow, I can't wait. So would you be able to tell us about some of your experiences on Top Chef and, like, say, Taste the Nation, and how they are similar or how they differ?
Sure. I mean, actually, the new season of Top Chef is coming out in less than 2 weeks. It'll premiere on April 1st, 2 weeks from today, or 3 weeks from today, whatever April 1st is, that Thursday. But, I was really shocked that they called us back to work, because I didn't know how we were going to film this thing in the middle of COVID. We managed to pull it off, thank God. Touch wood, nobody got sick. We were in a very, very tight lockdown bubble of 160 people. But Top Chef is much more controllable than Taste the Nation, again, because it's in a soundstage. And while we do go on location or in restaurants, we can control the environment. We usually go into restaurants when they're closed and stuff. So I have 150, 60 people with me on Top Chef. On Taste the Nation, at the most, I have 15. I like even less if I can. Like, at some point in the first season, I started doing my own makeup, because I thought there's just too many people on this set. When you're trying to create that intimacy, the less people you have with you, the better. The best way to capture an environment you're trying to cover in its original, undiluted or unspoiled form is to have a really small footprint. And also, a lot of the people on Taste the Nation are not camera savvy, have not ever been on even radio, let alone TV, and they're shy, and they're sometimes conservative immigrants. And so you want to create a very quiet, non-disruptive environment, and that means just having less people. I always try and spend time with the people that are on the show before the camera ever goes on. I tell them what they're going to expect. On Top Chef, the contestants, are subjected to constant fear, because we want to win, because, we don't tell them anything. They're all thrown in a house by the first episode, with people they've never met, but they're savvy, right? They've signed up for this. They want to compete. Most of them are very established chefs because of the success that Top Chef has earned, not only in television or media, but actually in the professional food world. It's very prestigious to get on. So it self-selects at this point. We really, in the early seasons, we always had a few clunkers, and you never know. You can't account for how people are going to be once they get on the competition, and you get what you get. But for the most part, they're really experienced chefs. So it's not that I don't have sympathy. I have enormous sympathy for them too. But they know what they're signing up for. And so there's always an adrenaline and an anticipation and anxiety on set. For me, obviously. And I actually try my best to counteract that and calm the contestants down, because I want them to do their best work. And if you're so scared, which you are because you want to win, that clock is not your friend, But I try to always make them feel relaxed, because I know what it feels like. I'm there with them every minute of the day. So I'm trying to relax everybody on both shows, but it's a little bit different. Top Chef is a pressure all of its own. I would never compete on Top Chef, not in the world. I don't, but people do,
Yeah. I feel the same way. So I'm glad. It's like this incredible amount of pressure. And I sometimes wonder, like, why do these people do this? But it makes for great TV, and we love it. And keep coming back for more.
It's fun. It's fun. There are chefs who do well thinking fast on their feet. And I understand it because in my version of it, I love live television. You know, I mean, Top Chef is shot, it's not live, obviously, it's shot months before it airs, but it functions like a live television show, and that nobody's waiting for me to put on my lipstick. The food is hot, we're gonna eat it when that buzzer goes off, regardless. But, you know, there is less pressure for me because I'm not scripted. I'm scripted when I'm telling them the challenge, of course, because, you know, there's a legal department at NBC that makes sure I'm saying the challenge right and everything. That's also the first time you're hearing it at home, you know, and it's important to understand what that is. But what you don't see on Top Chef is that once I give that challenge, we stop filming. There's still a camera running, but we allow all of the chefs to ask questions. We make sure they all understand the challenge. We make them sign an affidavit that they understood the parameters of the challenge, that they had a chance to ask questions, and that every contestant hears the same answers to all of those questions together. And so, you know, there's no, I mean, regardless of what they say in their interviews, they've all had a chance to do that. And then we start the clock. So there's no, you know, there's no pressure for me, but for them, you know, there's so many cameras running, there's no do-overs, and food is an organic thing. You know, on Taste the Nation, it's really about people, and the food is just the excuse.
Right. So on a more serious note, you're the co-founder of the Endometriosis Foundation of America, and also the American Civil Liberties Union, and artistic ambassador for immigrant rights. Can you tell us about your work with those organizations?
Sure. I suffered from endometriosis all my life since I was 13 years old, but I never knew what it was. You know, I have several doctors in my family. I always was lucky enough to have good health insurance and lived in big cities, whether they were New York or Los Angeles or London, but I was never diagnosed. And once I was properly diagnosed in my 30s and got the treatment that I needed, my life changed by 180 degrees. You know, I had laparoscopic excision surgery, and my doctor, you know, convinced me to talk to some of his patients. You know, it's a very touchy, private topic, reproductive disease that affects about 10% of all women, we believe. And so, you know, he just wanted me to talk to other young women who were going through it. And he had already had a little patient support group. And once I did that, we decided that, you know, a lot of people can't even pronounce endometriosis. I mean, they can now, but, you know, at the time, nobody was talking about it. And so we don't have a cure for endometriosis, but we do have good treatment. We at the EFA believe that the gold standard, when safe to do so, is surgery to remove the tissue that's causing havoc in the reproductive system and beyond. And so we just started the foundation, and it was hard at first because, you know, I'm used to being in front of the camera. I'm used to being forthright, but nobody wants to talk about their period. Nobody wants to talk about their vagina in large rooms. But my niece started also having some problems, and I didn't want her to go through what I went through. You know, I was down with a heating pad and really strong pain medication for a whole week, every single month of my life, from 13 to 36, until I got the operation. And, you know, I had several procedures. And so it was only after living for a year or so and healing from that that I realized how much my life was dwarfed and really impeded my work life, my personal relationships. Just being in chronic pain sucks, you know. And you can't do good work, and you can't be there for your family. And so I didn't want the next generation of women to go through that. It's hard enough as women to compete on an equal playing field for the same opportunities and promotions and stuff. If you add the layer of chronic disease and pain, it becomes that much harder. And nobody wants to go to their boss and say, oh, I have my period, I can't come in. And so I just thought, let's talk about it. every living thing, every human being comes from the womb. So even if you don't have one, you came out of one. And so we at the EFA say that it's not just a woman's biological illness, it is a family issue. It affects everyone in that woman's circle, her kids, her colleagues, etc. And I think the experience of talking to the medical community, but also to lawmakers and also to researchers and public school people, to educate young people as they're going through puberty about this disease, gave me my voice, gave me the practice and the training ground to then speak about immigration rights, for the last 5 years when a lot of stuff was happening at the border that I really didn't think was humane. A lot of rhetoric was coming out of Washington that was really not true. And you had a lot, which you still do, by the way, hate crimes committed against immigrants, committed against all immigrants, whether they were, white collar engineers working at Google, or they were, gardeners, and everything in between, or mom and pop restaurants, and it just didn't seem fair. Because to me, the thing that's so great about this country is actually the ethos that anybody can come here and build a life, and in turn, build their life, but also in turn build the country stronger. I mean, what would Google be without the contributions of immigrants, for example? And so I just wanted to shift the narrative. And I got involved with the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU, very quickly after the election. And I started working more and more with them. And because of my work in women's reproductive health and all of the misogyny also that's in healthcare, there are a lot of people that don't even want Planned Parenthood. There are a lot of people who don't want contraception. But, many women use contraceptive pills to treat their endometriosis because they can't afford surgery. It's not covered by insurance. So these issues were sort of overlapping. And, I became an artist ambassador a few years ago, specifically to counteract all of the real xenophobia that is out there still. And through that work and meeting a lot of immigrants who were outside my circle, and befriending one of the country's leading legal experts on immigration law, a man named Lee Gallert, who is one of the lead counsels on immigration policy at the ACLU, and getting to know him and really learning very deeply, for me at least, as a lawyer or lawmaker, just made me see that this issue is so integral and essential to the founding of this country and the evolution of America culturally and economically. And that's really what led to Taste the Nation. It was one way of turning my work and my advocacy off of work into one thing. And, I'm very lucky that I was able to find a way to use what I do professionally to further what I believed in outside of the office.
Yeah. And you know what? Thank you so much, because as a woman, I can just say that I feel like we do have a voice now through you, and thank you for that. So let's see. You're a visiting scholar at MIT. What is that about?
I don't know, but I mean, I know what it's about. It's great for me because I'm the only one in my family who doesn't have a graduate degree. And for a long time, they didn't really understand what the hell I did. Most of my family are either, like I said, in healthcare or in engineering or whatever. And so, they all laughed when I got this, by the way. They didn't believe it. They were like, what? But the truth is that we launched the first research center at MIT for gynopathology of its kind with the Harvard Medical School. And I was very lucky to be able to do that with the foundation. And I've kept in touch with that research center at MIT, and I go there and I speak with researchers there so that they understand they understand, but just to give them, the ways in which their research affects women in their daily lives, sort of put a human face and effect to what they're doing. And so most of my work is related to that Gynopathology Research Institute. I'm not like at MIT teaching history or anything. So I just visit there when and as they need me, and I help out in whatever little way that I possibly can. But it's been one of the proudest things of my life to be associated with them, because it's very exciting, and I have such great admiration for those researchers and biologists. Dr. Linda Griffith is the person who is my contact there, but also, Anantha there is somebody I also know who is a dean in the engineering department as well.
Wow, it's very, very impressive. So, all right, now we're on to some meatier topics. So diversity and inclusion is appropriately at the forefront of our minds these days. How do you think that chefs and food in general can help with this?
I mean, I think we all have a role to play, in this. And like I said earlier, I think food is one of the biggest ways that we connect with people. I mean, think about all of our rituals in culture. When we go out on a date, we take someone out to dinner. We want to close a deal. We do, a business lunch, a power breakfast. When somebody dies, we take a casserole. When someone gets married, the biggest thing that we plan is the wedding supper. So food plays such an important role in all of the cultural markings and rituals of our lives as a society. And it's a great way to open a discussion, through breaking bread together. I think chefs have, especially well-established white male chefs, have a really big responsibility to mentor people who may be outside of their circle, to go into colleges or high schools or universities and really look for diversity in the pool that they hire from, and not everybody thinks of a career in food. I didn't even know that was a career, when I grew up in the 80s, going to high school, like we went out to dinner maybe once or twice a month, but I didn't understand that it was a career. We were going to a neighborhood Thai restaurant. I didn't grow up in a way that we went to fancy restaurants, that it was something to aspire to, that it was, this big thriving business. I just didn't know. I mean, I watched PBS, so I watched food shows and I understood about cookbooks, and I always loved cookbooks, which is probably why I'm a food writer and not a chef. But, to just open your circle, because that is not only the right thing to do ethically, it's also the right thing to do for business. You want people around you that don't always come from the same background, who show you things you wouldn't have thought of or tasted or, been exposed to. That makes for a more interesting menu. They in turn will educate you in exchange for mentoring them. And I think that's one thing that, bigger, more successful chefs in any given city can do. They can go out to high schools, they can reach out to career departments and say, like, I'm looking for people interested in working at a restaurant, and do stages, do internships there. That, another thing that people should do, not people, but I think that culinary schools in this country and beyond should be teaching indigenous food practices, because that's good for the environment, and it's good for us to know what was here before all of us immigrants got here, including on the Mayflower. I also think that we should be teaching African American food, so that people can identify with that. The reason I probably didn't think I could ever be a chef, even though I'd love to cook and spent most of my free time with the women in my family cooking anyway, is because I couldn't identify with that big chef. That didn't speak to me. It wasn't the food I grew up eating. And I think we need that to also diversify what gets given to us on a fancy plate. Like, I'm sick of having French food, to be honest. I am. If you gave me a choice between going to a 3-star Michelin restaurant for a tasting menu, or like a street food crawl in some city, I would always pick the second one, which is why I love Taste the Nation, because it's so antithetical to what we do on Top Chef.
Exactly.
It's perfect for me. I can go into Chanel and come out empty-handed, no problem. But if I go to a food market or a market, whether it's in Union Square or Marrakesh, I'm coming home with all kinds of seeds and twigs, and I love that. And the thing I love most when I go to a new city is I ask the cab drivers where I should eat, because they're on the roads all the time, and they're going to tell you the true places to go and discover.
That's so true. Food insecurity. It's been more in the public eye than ever. If one has limited resources, what advice would you give to them that they would be able to stretch their food without sacrificing flavor? What tip would you give them?
Well, I mean, I grew up eating very humbly. I was a vegetarian until I got to high school. I think what we're finding is that we don't need as much meat protein as we thought we did. For example, one serving of animal protein, whether it's chicken or beef, costs about $2.50, whereas one serving of plant protein, like beans or lentils, cost, I don't know, 28 cents or 30 cents, and it's also healthier for you, but it's also healthier for the soil and the planet. You're not, your carbon footprint is a lot less. And it's also less expensive to buy a bag of lentils than it is to buy 4 steaks. And you feed 4 people with both of those things. Yeah. And also, again, adding flavor with spices, with condiments, that's a really great way. Whenever I want to stretch something, or I have just 2 or 3 people showing up that I didn't expect, I throw potatoes in stews all the time. You can buy a 5-pound bag of potatoes, and it's not that much. When I was in college, I was a financial aid student. I had no money at all. And I remember I was a theater and a lit major, so I had a lot of books to buy at the beginning of every semester. And I would make this dish, which I called Greek spaghetti. I don't know what the hell I was thinking, but it was literally just sauteing onions in a little bit of olive oil and butter, and then adding oregano and thyme and bay leaf and red chili, and really sauteing that. And then I would boil the spaghetti, and I would toss the spaghetti in that, and I would just put Parmesan cheese. I mean, now I use way better cheese, but those days canister, which that's what I knew in those days. And so I would be able to feed myself a good 5 meals with a box of spaghetti and a bag of onions and some spices and a bottle of oil. And I had to do that. So still make that dish sometimes because it's delicious. Now I add a little miso paste, but it's so, my tastes in food don't, except for champagne, don't really run very expensive to begin with, because I didn't grow up that way. But that's how I would stretch things. I think it's a real issue. Food scarcity is a big deal. And I hope that this administration increases SNAP, increases funding for school lunches and stuff. And when you see how much money they have per lunch per child, it's abominable. Even if you're, fiscally conservative and you're not a liberal person, I have some friends who are, they're very conservative. If you believe that you want your country to do better, not better tomorrow, but better tomorrow, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, you must invest in education. You must invest in nutrition for those children, because those children are going to be running this country down the line. So to me, there's no better investment than putting our dollars in food, in healthy food, in the soil, and not raping the soil just for profit now. And also for, education. We don't have a tendency to think long-term in this country. And I think what we've seen with COVID is that we really do need to think long-term, because it's never going to be us versus them, because now you see that it doesn't matter how great my healthcare is or how careful my family is. I still rely on the guy who picks my fruit and packs my groceries to
Mhm.
my family. And if he or she is not insured, if he or she doesn't have proper health care, we're all going to suffer. Hence the pandemic.
True. Yeah, I know. Thank you for that. I think we're going to pivot now to some audience questions.
Sure.
So let's see. So Elisa would like to know, what are some staple spices that we should have in our pantry?
Hi, Lisa. So I would say if you like to cook Mediterranean food, Mediterranean being Spanish, Greek, Italian, even Turkish, etc., here are the spices you need for your pantry: oregano, thyme, dill, bay leaves, crushed red chili, onions, and garlic. You should keep those. You should keep those all. The onions and garlic should be fresh, but everything else can be dried. And if you like Asian food, you should have 5-spice powder, Chinese 5-spice powder. You should have cumin, seeds in powder, coriander, seeds in powder, dry mango powder, which is another souring agent that you can get in the grocery stores. And then you should have different chilies. You should have a mild chili powder, like Kashmiri chili powder. And then you should have a spicy chili powder, like cayenne. If you like Middle Eastern food, you should have za'atar, which is a spice blend out of the Middle East that comes in a bottle. It has wild thyme, it has sumac in it, it has sesame seeds and some other things, and za'atar, actual wild thyme. And then you should also have sumac, which I spoke about earlier. And those spices will really get you very far. Try to buy some Szechuan peppercorns and use them judiciously. That is the spice that you can grind up in your mortar and pestle that will make your tongue a little numb in certain types of Chinese food. And then have smoked paprika and a couple of good salts, fleur de sel for salad, sea salt, and kosher salt. And also whole peppercorns and that you crush, and a good mortar and pestle. Those are the spices you need. Oh, turmeric also.
Okay. For our next question, we're going to go to Tyler. Thank you, Padma. If you weren't a chef in Food Space or in Top Chef, which he's a big fan of, what would you say your dream job is?
I would like to be Rihanna, please. I cannot sing. Nobody wants me to sing. Even my daughter, who loves me very much, is like, Mom, please close your mouth now. So I wish I had a beautiful singing voice. I do like being on stage. I was a theater major, and I, have acted for a long time. So I would still like to be on stage, but I think I would love to be a rock star. Just the wardrobe and the choreography. I want to be able to dance and sing like that.
Okay. For our next question, this is from Amol. Hi, Padma. Can you tell us what the composition is of your personal garam masala?
Sure. So thank you, Amol. Garam masala is a spice blend that is very popular and common in the north of India. It's sort of the ras al hanout of Indian cuisine, and it has a lot of the same ingredients that something like a baharat from Turkey or a ras al hanout from Morocco has. My personal garam masala has coriander, cumin, red chili, black peppercorn, black ilachi or cardamom, and it also has a little bit of green cardamom and clove. I personally don't use garam masala in everything. I will use it to make chole or chana, which is chickpeas in a stew, which is another street food that you make with fried bread, or pav bhaji, also another North Indian dish. But I sometimes will just buy store-bought garam masala. I'll make it in small batches, or I will buy it. But I don't like to make a big batch because I don't use it every day. The spice blend that I use every day is more sambar powder, which is a South Indian spice blend that you usually use in a lentil stew called sambar, which is, yellow lentils with tamarind and vegetables. But I use it with other things too. I use it when I want to saute. And that has fenugreek, it has chilies, it has a little bit of fried lentils, it has coriander seed and red chili, and I will grind that. If you're buying a store-bought sambar powder, I would recommend 777 or Agmark brand. Those brands are great. And I find that you should buy spices in smaller quantities. Don't buy that big thing that you see at the pizzeria place, because you're not a pizzeria place. Spices do get stale and go bad. So I buy my spices in like a 3 or 4 ounce container. Sometimes I'll buy a big bag of cumin seed because I use that a lot. But often, I'll take a small batch of whole spices. I will dry roast them in a hot, dry frying pan or wok. And then I will grind them in a mortar and pestle. And the aroma is so different. You will need less. Or I also have a little coffee grinder when I'm doing like a big roast that I need a lot of marinating spices. I will grind spices in the coffee grinder. It's like $35-$40, and just
it's worth it.
One for spices. Yeah.
Okay. Next up is from Hema. I hope I pronounced that right. Hi, Padma. I am a huge fan. What is your favorite high-effort show-stopped recipe?
It is the bistia. It's the Moroccan bistia in Tangy Tart, hot and sweet. And like I said, it's not difficult. It's just fiddly. So buy phyllo pastry that is a little bit wider, like 17 inches, and unroll, leave the pastry in the fridge right until you're ready to cook. Brown your meat, have all of your ingredients ready, melt the butter, and then you want to get 2 or 3 thin dishcloths. You want to put one down on the bottom, and then you want to unwrap the phyllo pastry, put a dry one over it, and then a third one you want to wet and wring it out really well so that it's just damp, and put that over the dry one, and keep your pastry underneath those cloths at all times. And lift up the cloth and just take the ones you need. Get a shallow cake pan and just lay them on there, and have a pastry brush and brush each layer with a little clarified butter, melted butter ghee, and then get 3 more, and you just lay them, almost like at 1 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 11 o'clock, like that all around. And then you fill it, and then you fold all of the excess that's laying outside of that circle pan, the overhang, you fold that over, and you brush that all with butter, and then you top it with slivered almonds and stuff. And it's such a beautiful recipe. When you bring it out, all you need with that is just a salad and dessert.
Okay, so Padma, we've got one last question. And the question is from Matt. Chef, what are your favorite seasonal ingredients? Maybe just 4.
Yeah, in the fall, I love pomegranates. I adore pomegranates. I grew up eating them. I put them on peanut butter toast. I put them in salads. I make drinks out of them. In the spring now, I am really, really looking forward to ramps coming up, which are wild leeks, because they're only around for a little while. Most people don't like this, but in May, I like fiddlehead ferns. They're a little bitter, and they look crazy, right? They're these long green things that are kind of entwined and round, twined up. What am I trying to say? Wound up in themselves. And they're really weird vegetables, and they're only around for a couple of weeks in May, and I love those. Those are coming up. And juicy, juicy melon and tomatoes in the summer. I will often just use canned tomatoes in the winter and spring because the tomatoes are so watery. I mean, now you're getting stuff shipped from Florida or California if you live on the East Coast, but there's nothing like an August tomato. And I love making a BLT, and I only do it in summer because I want that juicy end of summer whole tomato on toast.
Perfect, right? What a great way to close us out. Everyone, please be sure to check out the YouTube description below for the link to get Tangy Tart, hot and sweet, a world of recipes for every day, and for being such a passionate advocate and educator. Padma, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I hope you guys enjoyed the book. I'm very flattered that the publisher wanted to reissue it after all these years. And as I was saying earlier before we started, I think I came when the book first launched to see you guys at Google in person. So it feels like a good omen that I'm here today with you. It just came out yesterday. So thank you so much for your support. Have a great day.
All right. Thanks again.